Okay, let's draw some eyes. So in order to draw the eyes, I first have to explain something called the magic curve, which is patent pending. But the magic curve goes something like this. And this is essential to understanding how to draw some of the issues that come up in three-quarter view eyes. But let's take two hemispheres. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, that's a bad one, but anyway. So let's imagine I'm going to take these hemispheres and I'm going to cut them in half. Okay, so I'm going to just slice them this way. So this first one, I'm going to cut like that. And there's A and there's B. Okay, so to get from point A to B, I go like this. I take a little journey and I have a curve like that. It's kind of like the front half of an ellipse. Okay, now let's imagine I cut this one and now A is here and B is here. Okay, so it can be A and B can be anywhere, any 2 points opposite each other on this ellipse. So now my cut goes like this. So A, B. So now my journey goes like this. So you notice the difference. So in three-quarter view, to get from A to B, I first have to go left, turn, and then go right. Whereas if somebody's looking right at me, or if it's facing me, then I just go right, right? So this is important because when we are drawing the eye in three-quarter view, this is what's going to come up. So let's take a look at some of these ideas. This also comes back to the idea of up, over, and back. And I'll show you how that's going to work with the eye. Let's start with the basics of an eye being a sphere. So there's your eyeball right there. And in three-quarter view, what's going to happen is we're going to have basically your eyelid is going to be 3 planes. It's going to come forward, it's going to come forward, it's going to come over, and it's going to go back. And in the case of the upper eyelid, we're going to see here's the tear duct. The upper eyelid's going to come up, it's going to come over, and it's going to go back. And we could think of it as something like this. So 3 planes, boom, boom, boom. Okay, and then the lower lid is going to match up with that for the most part. So we're going to see the lower lid come towards us and then go over here and then go up there. So it's just going to be facing a different direction. Boom, 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 like that. And then, of course, we can give it some thickness because eyelids have thickness. And we end up with something like that. Okay, so in terms of planes and form, we want to think of that up, over, and back concept. If we just draw symbols for eyes, we're going to get no depth, no volume. We have to think of it in terms of planes, and we have to think of up, over, and back as much as we can. So that's what we're going to be trying to work out here. Let me get rid of this for a second. Some other things worth noting about the eye. So the eye is not symmetrical. Okay. The actual opening of the eye does something like this. Here's your tear duct, and we're going to go up. We're going to come down, over, and then at the end we're going to come back. And then on the lower lid opening, we're going to have this, something like that. So this way and over, then back. And what you'll notice is these 2 points right here, boom, boom. So that looking straight at an eye, the opening is asymmetrical. In other words, we don't have the high point and the low point aren't directly above and below one another, but are at this kind of funny angle like this. The other thing that's worth noting is that eyes generally tend to move from the tear duct down to the corner back here slightly downward. The overall axis of the eye is being slightly downward, and this is going to become more pronounced in the three-quarter view. So we have, again, the case of something that is curving both this way and this way in our drawing, which makes it, again, quite challenging. And what is doubly problematic with the eye is there are two of them. So their relationship to one another looks very confusing, can be very confusing. There are some diagrams in the handout that's posted, the feature study sheet, that you should definitely look at for that. But I'll try to explain those a little bit here. So, but just generally speaking, like if I have, so nose, mouth, and then as I lay out the eyes, I mentioned this, I think, when we were drawing briefly before we broke up for spring break, is that I usually, as I'm blocking in the eyes, do something like this. So I kind of exaggerate the axis of that eye and kind of try to explain the relationship of the pair of eyes together. See, they're on this curving surface like that. It's curving this way, but it's also curving that way. So if you think about where on that curve those eyes are, it will be follow that general pattern, you see. And what happens with a lot of these is people will think about, and it makes sense, but there's a certain perspective that we talked about. There's the chin, and then the mouth goes like that, and the nose goes like that. So do the eyes go like that? Well, what happens is people will put this eye up too high because they just draw it almost like it's a flat perspective like that. But without taking into account that that perspective can also occur on a curve. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at when we do a three-quarter view. And then there's the people like that. Okay, so let's take a look at what that's going to look like when we draw it. And so I'm going to start with just a pretty straightforward three-quarter view. And then nose, mouth. Okay, so let's find the shape of the nose in here. And then that's going to help us with the placement of the eyes. And we're going to see that magic curve come up in just a second. Now, this eye over on this side is going to be facing us more. So if we think about the curvature of the head at that point, this area right here is pointing more towards us, like facing us. Over here, this is facing slightly away from us. So we're going to get a different shape when we get to that point. So here, we can kind of define the tear duct, and we can do the up, over, and back. And it's going to be slightly exaggerated. Opening. And the other thing, I try not to draw closed shapes again for this feature because it will look too flat. So again, just trying to draw little pieces of it. And then there'll be other things that happen here. So in here somewhere is the sphere of the eyeball, and we can kind of take that into account. And we'll see it a little bit out here as we come around to the lid. And then the shape of this eye, this is where the magic curve is going to come. So this eye right here, we're doing the A to B more like this. Over here, it's going to be more like that. So this is, again, facing us more. This is curving around. So let's figure out where that other tear duct is. So remember, the nose comes up and around. So find where that other, it's going to be hidden probably in 3/4 view. So I'm going to start, like, imagine starting right from behind that nose and just sketch out that curve like this. Boom, something like that. And now what you want to do, if you're thinking about the perspective of the eyes, you know, if you feel like the perspective is this way, okay, then what you want to look at is the two matching points, so the two tear ducts. So if you connect the two tear ducts, that should go in the same direction, okay? If you're at eye level, if you're looking at a mirror at eye level, then they should be directly across from each other like this. If you're looking dramatically down at somebody, then the line between the tear ducts should rise, or if you find the two outer corners of the eyes, they should do the same thing. Also, relatively speaking, there's about 1 eye width between the two eyes from tear duct to tear duct. Again, it varies a little bit from person to person, but that's a good starting point. Remember that this is the bridge of our nose, and we're going to come out into the nose and have that. So let's work out this shape here. Incidentally, people tend to make eyes too big, so be aware of that. Don't make the eyes too big. Now, as far as, you know, what I like to do at this point is just kind of map out a little bit of the eye socket area. And here I'm going to use the nose to help me out as I define the brow line. So the glabella leads me to there and there. And so if I imagine I come down and in around the eye and then out the lower lid and then out onto the cheekbone area and then down. And here we get that stronger curve of that eye. And that's also going to repeat in the brow. So here we see the brow, like the magic curve, it kind of just, because it's facing us, just goes to the right. So it goes up, hits that natural arch, and then comes down, and we get that plane. Over here, it's going to be more dramatic. It's going to kind of do that, cut that back around on itself, and create the line of the brow there. Cheekbone, so here's your cheekbone here. Here it is over there, coming down around the mouth. Okay, so here we have this shape. The eye feels like it goes back from the pinch point of the nose, right there where the nasal bone is going to be. And we're going to have a sense of the curvature of the sphere of the eye from the plane change from here down to here. Now, again, this is something that varies from person to person. Sometimes you can see quite a lot of the underside of the brow. Some people have a brow that kind of comes down and you don't see the upper lid when somebody's face is at rest. You might just see the fold of the brow come down and kind of hide the eye a little bit. So that's something you'll have to look at individually. The other thing worth noting here is the way that the corner of the eye here, outer corner, at the bottom lid kind of tucks up under. So the upper lid sits on top and the lower lid goes underneath it. And right at the end, the lower lid is almost going straight up like that. So it curves up pretty strong in that direction. Eyelids have thickness, so I always like to indicate a little, if you can, just a little thickness with the upper lid. Again, it tends to be more in shadow because it's facing downward, whereas the thickness of the lower lid faces upward. So you get something like that. And we'll talk about the iris in just a minute. Now, I still like to play with this a little bit. I'm just looking at what I did here. I think I'm going to change this slightly so that it's a little bit, yeah, a little more angle, a little higher. That feels better. And this far eye is going to be much rounder. It's going to be a much shorter shape. So the distance from tear duct to outer eye here is longer. Here it's going to be shorter because of its position. And then here's the sphere of the eye. And we're going to see this come up and go tuck in behind like that. And this is a good point to maybe just lay in a little suggestion of the iris. And it takes a little practice to get the eyes not to look like they're crossed. And also worth noting is, again, everybody's a little different. How much of the iris do you see? Do you see a lot of people, the top of their iris is hidden by the top lid. Sometimes a little bit of the bottom and top are hidden. Some people, you might see all of the iris. Again, that's a characteristic difference from person to person. But that's worth noting. And then up here, you might see the fold of the lid a little bit here, down like that. And we're getting that. Look. The other thing is, of course, there will be an actual cast shadow created by the upper lid usually, and so you often see a little bit of gives it a little depth if you kind of push the eye back, something like that. But I think the most important thing here is just noticing in the relationship of the two eyes that curve like that. Now, something else that needs to be pointed out, and that is, well, let's look at these planes quickly again. But so we're going to come around the brow. The brow usually matches up the plane change with the eyebrow. Not always, but usually. By the way, don't overdo the eyebrow. Everybody overdoes the eyebrow. So underplay the eyebrow. We're going to come around, and then if we can see the lid, I'm going to draw this as though we can actually see a lid here. Like a good Leonardo da Vinci drawing. We're going to come in, and then we're going to come out, and we're going to have the thickness of the lid, and we get that sort of strong, like a hood of that eye. And then here, that movement like that. So again, we come up, over, and back to create that plane. Over here, again, it's still there, but it's going to be stretched out, and the last curve is hidden from us. It kind of tucks around to the other side. Then we have the plane showing the volume of the sphere of the eye, and then we're going to have a little shelf here to the cheekbone. And so your cheekbone's going to be in here, and then down towards the corner of the mouth. And remember, we're going to get that sort of triangular plane as we go from the cheekbone down to the zygomatic. But this step, so down, step over, down, like that. And then around here, everything's moving kind of like this. And then here's the plane change from the middle of the forehead to that side plane, the parietal arch, like that. Okay. Now, we talked about how the mouth has that 30-degree angle. So the eyes have the same thing. So in profile, when we look at an eye, we want to think about it like this, that the lower lid is below the upper lid. So think of the opening. Again, that sort of 30-degree angle. And also important in profile view is that the visible shape of the eye is going to be much narrower, like the distance from, in a profile view, from the front of the eye to the back corner of the eye is quite small. In fact, the shape is probably taller than it is deep in your drawing, okay? Which is also the case with that foreshortened eye on that side. What was the other thing that I wanted to talk about the eye? So we were talking about the iris, we were talking about the 30-degree angle, and the other thing that is worth looking at, this is a really tricky one, but if you are looking at, let's say you're at eye level with the eye, then it makes sense that the opening kind of goes like this, right? So there's one curve and there's the other curve, and that's your curved eyelids around a sphere. But what happens if you are looking down at the eye? What if you're looking, somebody tilts their head down? In that case, you get this really interesting thing. Even with their eyes open, the curve of the lid will do something like this. And it doesn't take much. It could be just a very slight downward look, but you'll get a curve like that. So, and you'll get a more pronounced curve for the lower lid. So this would be looking at somebody who is looking more downward. You could actually see that shape, the curve of the upper lid, instead of curving upward like that, which makes sense, it could actually curve slightly downward. And again, that's because of that funny axis, the sort of slightly lower on the outside axis of that eye. So it's worth noting, and just kind of keeping in mind what you're doing is taking a sphere and you're wrapping something around it. So if you're looking down at it, it's going to curve the other way. It's going to follow the form. Again, any other questions that you have about eyes, you can ask in the video conference, or you can post questions on the Blackboard page, okay? But I would like to use the video conferences to ask very communal questions. Maybe everybody can benefit from them a little bit. I don't know if I'll be able to do live video tutorials, but I could always post a new tutorial explaining, common questions. Okay, thanks very much.